Hi everybody, I am Mrs. Mulcahy and I am going to talk to you about the cost theory practice test problems. So my advice to you would be to take a look at your practice test, and the ones that I'm going to demonstrate for you on here are numbers 10, 17, 19 and 20, 21, 22 and 23, 24, 25, 26 and 27, and I also added 2 extra problems that I do not think that you have in your FAT packet or are part of your practice test, but you can take a look and practice those too. Alright, so now first when we look at number 10, what we want to do and what I think is really helpful to do for these is that you should take this information and make it into a form that's more useful to you. So take it out of the paragraph and basically just set it up into some sort of a table. So as you can see, what I did is I took the quantity, I put my average fixed cost, my average variable cost, and my marginal cost. So looking at these, it was asking me about either average total cost or total cost. So what I did is I added my average fixed and average variable together to get $27, and I realized that if I multiply by that 10, that would give me $270. So the answer for number 10 is C. Now, if we look on the next page, which is for question number 17, let's rewrite everything and let's figure out what information we have. So what I can do is I can calculate my average total cost by getting my average fixed cost and taking 100 divided by 20, which is 5, then adding that together to my average variable cost of 8. I can then figure out my profit or loss for this problem by taking my price of $10 minus my average total cost of $8 and then multiplying it by the quantity, which is 20. So when I do that, I get a per unit profit of $2 times 20 units, which gives me a profit of $40. The next problem gives us a graph, and we have a output and a total cost. So what I need to do first is I need to figure out my profit maximizing, because in questions 19 and 20, they're asking me about product price and wants to know how many units I'm going to make. So if you remember, profit maximizing is going to tell us the quantity is going to tell us our quantity based on where our marginal revenue is equal to our marginal cost. Now this information is given it to us in just total cost, so what we need to do is calculate our marginal cost. The other thing that's important to remember as well is that if you know your product price of $60, then we also know our marginal revenue, which will be $60 as well. So I'm going to calculate my marginal cost for all of these outputs. So my change in total cost divided by my change in quantity. Since my quantity change is 1, all I really have to do is look at my change in total cost. So this is what I come up with. So you're going to notice that marginal cost will start out high, gets lower or gets less, and then it goes back up again. So a lot of times if you feel like your profit maximizing number should only be 0, but it seems like if you can see that there's 2 marginal costs that are the same at 1 unit of output and at 5, ignore the first unit of output and do the 5th one instead. So let's go back and let's look at problem 19. So it's asking us about a product price of $60. So I have to find where my marginal revenue equals my marginal cost. Since there's not a quantity where it exactly equals it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the quantity where they're closest to being equal, but that my marginal revenue is going to be bigger than my marginal cost. And then at that quantity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare my price to average total cost to figure out my profits or losses. However, in this one, since I have a total cost version, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to try and look at your total revenue minus your total cost. So if I look at that, I should make 6 units of output. If I sell each one for $60 each, that gives me a total revenue of $360. Subtract my total cost of $260, it gives me $100 in profit. So for number 20, we have a product price of $45, which gives us a marginal revenue of $45. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ignore that first unit where it's 40, and I'm going to look at the second one. And once again, I don't have an exact match for my marginal revenue, so I take the one that's closest as long as marginal revenue is bigger than marginal cost. I'm going to go total revenue minus total cost again. I get $225 minus $210, which gives us $15, which means that C is the correct answer. Now for this one, it's giving us our marginal costs already, so we need to just go ahead and just do the same thing. Marginal revenue minus marginal costs, then figure out my average, find my average total cost, and then figure out the profit or losses. In this case, I'm losing $27.25. Now, if a firm loses money, they can choose to stay open and lose money, or they can choose to shut down or lose money. The way that they make that decision is by looking at their loss and figuring out which is more, their fixed costs or the loss that they make from staying open. If you shut down, you lose the amount of your fixed costs. If you stay open, you lose the amount that you actually are losing from producing. So the whole key to whether you stay open or shut down is if your loss when you stay open is more than your fixed costs. So let's take a look at how much our loss would be if we stayed open. So if I take the $27.25 loss times 4, it gives me $109. My fixed cost is average fixed cost times quantity, which is $25 times $4. So that gives me a loss of $100. I'm better off if I shut down and lose $100 instead of staying open and losing $109. Now the next one gives me a price of $32, so that's my marginal revenue. I come up with 8 units as my profit maximizing quantity, and then when I calculate my profits and losses, I take my price minus average total cost, which is 32 minus 30, and multiply that by the 8 units. So that gives me $2 times 8 units, which is a $16 profit. And last, we have a product price of $28. That gives me 7 units, and I'm going to do the same thing. So in this case, $28 minus $30, which gives me a loss. So I shut down if my fixed cost is less than my loss. So right now, my loss is going to be $14, but my fixed costs are going to be $100. And I figured that out by taking your fixed costs by quantity. So in this case, we would stay open and we would just lose the $14. We'll find out more next unit about when actually we would shut down or how long we would take that loss for. All right, on to number 24. For this one, it's pretty easy. It's asking us about average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost. This is just knowing your formulas. So when I calculate those, it gives me $10, $60, and $70 respectively. For number 25, it wants to know the marginal cost of the 5th unit. Marginal cost is your change in total cost divided by your change in quantity. So I could figure out my marginal cost for all of them, but since it's only asking me about the 5th unit, I just have to figure out the marginal costs I could just figure it out for the 5th unit. Because I look at my change in total cost from 4 to 5, so it was $350 minus $270, which is $80. Now with number 26, we're back doing our profit maximizing again. So I figure out all of my marginal costs, and then I figure out where my marginal revenue is closest to equaling my marginal cost. I get a quantity of 4 units, and then when I figure that one out, I do price minus average total cost, and that gives me my per unit profit, and it actually is my total profit. In this case, what I did is I figured out my total revenue, which was $4 times 75 cents, minus my total cost of $270, and that gives me a profit of $30. So for this one, sorry that it went kind of fast. So for this one, you can see that I have a chart that has marginal revenue and marginal cost. So I can figure out where they should equal each other. And again, you're going to choose where they're the closest to equaling each other as long as marginal revenue is larger. And I can figure out my profits or losses by taking the marginals and adding them to get my total revenue and my total cost. So when I add 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, it gives me 50. And if I add $6 plus $4 plus $3 plus $7 plus $9, it gives me $29. So when I take the difference of those, it gave me a $21 profit. Now with this one, it's giving us just total cost. So what I have to do is I have to get this information over to marginal cost so that I can figure out my profit maximizing. So when I figure out my marginal cost, this is what I come up with. And then that means I should make 3 units. Once again, since I have total cost, I'm going to figure out my total revenue minus my total cost. And that gives me a profit of $2 per unit. So what my best advice is for you during this test is to make sure that you know how to profit maximize. So that means that whenever you're looking for the quantity, you have to find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And if they don't exactly equal each other, find the quantity where the two are closest to equaling each other, but as long as marginal revenue is larger than marginal cost. Then what you need to do is find the average total cost for that quantity that you chose and then calculate your profits for that quantity. Remember that you can calculate profits depending on what you're asked for as price minus average total cost for per unit profit. You can take that per unit profit or loss, multiply it by quantity for total profit or loss. Or if you're given total data, sometimes it's easier to calculate total profits by taking total revenue minus total cost. And remember, total revenue is price times quantity. The other thing that I would give you advice on is that a big part of this test is being able to get the information into the format that you need. You might know how to profit maximize and find marginal revenue, marginal cost, but you're not always given marginal revenue and marginal cost. So you need to know if you're given price that actually is marginal revenue. You need to know if you need to calculate marginal cost, it's your change in total cost divided by your change in quantity. You also need to be able to calculate average total, average variable, and average fixed costs. And another thing that's useful to remember is that average total cost is equal to average variable cost plus your average fixed costs. So being able to manipulate these formulas to get them to that format and being able to figure out how many products you should make when you profit maximize and being able to calculate profits and losses is really what this test is going to be on. If you know how to do that, you'll do well. If you don't really know how to do that, make sure you go back and study it because you won't do all that well if you don't know how to do these things. Good luck.